Hi, and welcome to Best in Tesla. So, Jim Farley made an interview on NBC talking about EVs and the trouble the legacy automakers are in, especially the Germans that are losing the fight in China, and that the Chinese will come to the US is only a matter of time. But he also talks about what is needed to survive this shift and by when, and is again giving a lot of credit to Elon Musk and Tesla for the work they have done, and admits that false EVs are not good EVs underneath the skin. But they hope the next generation EV from Ford will fix that. That will come out in 2.5 years and will cost about $30,000. And that is what they're aiming for anyway. So let's check it all out and let's dive right in. So Jim Farley is once again open and transparent about their shift to EVs.
But let's talk a little bit about pricing, though, because you've said that EVs should not be subsidized and automakers should push to profitably produce EVs. What do you see as a reasonable timeline for that?
5 years, the next generation of vehicles I think you're going to see, but you have to make a radical change as an OEM to get to a profitable EV.
Jim really gets it, and also what needs to be done, and also in what pace it needs to be done. As he says, legacy automakers need to get to profitability with EVs within the next 5 years, or they will be in serious trouble. So before this decade is over. And he knows that Tesla and the Chinese are the real competition, as he has mentioned before. But as he also said, the new tariffs on EVs from China will level the playing field, but it cannot stop the Chinese invasion.
China is making very inexpensive EVs.
They are.
And has better infrastructure for charging.
Yes, and all the trillions of profitability that were taken out of China by the Western OEMs, they were busy thinking about their industry strategically, and they bet on electrification about 10 years ago. And now they make 70% of all electric vehicles in the world are made in one country. They own all the battery processing. You want graphite, you want lithium processed to put in a battery, automotive battery, a nickel, you need to go to China. So, they have unique battery chemistry like LFP, iron phosphate, which is half the cost, has no fire risk, and can be charged twice as many cycles. So there's unique IP in China now. And many of the companies are sponsored by the government. So we as a company face a kind of ultimate fitness test on this question of making money on EVs. If we cannot make money on EVs, we have competitors who have the largest market in the world, who already dominate globally, who are already setting up their supply chain around the world. And if we don't make profitable EVs next 5 years, what's the future? We just shrink into North America.
Because China has the volume of EVs in China and the supply chain is already set up. So they will come and set up shop in Mexico and bypass the tariffs to get into the US market.
Look, I think the tariffs and the policy decisions that the president has to make quickly will level the playing field. The state subsidies of free taxes, free land, a lot of R&D, we don't have the benefit from. The IRA really does help. It incentivizes us for making automotive batteries in the US. We made many decisions to actually make in the US now because of the IRA. But the biggest issue is those are going to be speed bumps. I worked at Toyota for 25 years as an American. I mean, we have NAFTA. They're 25% of the Mexican market already, the Chinese. We can all drive to Mexico one day. 1 out of every 4 vehicles sold in Mexico is made by a Chinese company. And they will have enough scale in China to build plants there and export tariff-free to the US. That's only a matter of time. That's why we have to be fully fit. That's why we created Skunkworks, because we have to compete against the Chinese players.
It will take a couple of years to build the factories in Mexico and so on, but it will happen. And then they will flood the US market with affordable EVs. As Jim is saying, they are already selling well in Mexico. 1 out of every 4 EVs in Mexico is Chinese. They are quickly taking market share all over the planet and are surrounding the US and will eventually break through the tariff wall and get inside.
So, to talk a little bit more about competition with China, how do you see the Biden administration's tariffs on EVs impacting the Chinese government and how they approach you and Ford and also other automakers?
Yes. Well, I think it's the answer to that question is very different for each auto company. We do not have a big China business. GM has a huge one. Volkswagen has enormous. I think 60% of Volkswagen's global profit comes from China. So every company has a different exposure.
And as Jim said, the legacy automakers are exposed to the threat of the Chinese EV companies in different ways. Because, as I have shown many times before, the Germans are in big trouble in China because they cannot keep up with the Chinese EV makers. But most German brands have something like 50% of their profits coming from China. So if they lose that market to the Chinese, they are basically done. It will be very painful to lose 50% of your business. So that is also why I have made so many videos trying to explain the trouble the German automakers are in, that Jim is also trying to point out here. Volkswagen has about 50% of their profit in China, but the Chinese don't want their EVs, but only their ICE cars. And Volkswagen knows this, and that is why they have partnered up with the new EV startup like XPeng that helps Volkswagen to make EVs in China that the Chinese people will actually want. Because they are losing in China and Volkswagen knows it. And it will be devastating to lose the Chinese market for someone like Volkswagen and the other German OEMs, of course. But I have a hard time seeing them turn this around in time, as the Chinese are moving so fast and someone like Volkswagen is moving so slow. But Ford is already mostly a US company and not so big outside, but as Jim is saying, if they can't get to profitable EVs within the next 5 years, they will shrink into a US only company. But GM has a lot more market in China, so this competition from China could hurt GM a lot more than it will hurt Ford. And Jim also said because of all the cameras that are on their EVs, they are not allowed to park next to the government building. Just like Tesla was not allowed to, but Tesla is now approved for that. But Jim is just saying that Ford is still not allowed to do that, but we just don't hear about it because it's not Tesla.
You know, and in China, we're not allowed to park a Ford next to a government building because of all those cameras. So what is the administration going to do about data privacy? In China, they have those rules. We do not have them in the U.S.
We're talking about concerns about TikTok, but what you're talking about...
Forget about Huawei and TikTok. Think about a Chinese vehicle and what their government could learn about our country, let alone partial electrification. You can crash the car into anything you want remotely. So these vehicles, so in China, if we want to get our partial electric hands-free AV approved, we have to go through their defense department. Elon was just there getting it. By the way, Elon deserves a lot of credit for this journey about electrification. He really does. But back to China, you know, for our national defense, we have to make up our mind. What kind of approval should we send a Chinese OEM's self-driving system through in our country?
So it also shows the good relationship that Elon and Tesla have with the Chinese government. And yes, that is thanks to Elon Musk. So again, a good showcase why Tesla needs Elon Musk, as he is the one that is breaking down the barriers for Tesla. And Jim Farley said that their skunk team is really trying to build the next generation EV in a whole new way.
The way we're thinking about building a vehicle now is not do the body structure and then paint it and then put the seats and the powertrain in it. Build the right and the left and the front and the rear separately so the workers can go in and put seats and carpeting and whatever else in the vehicle, and you don't have to have large construction kind of assistant for them. Another one is put the computer in right after you paint it So it diagnoses itself whether it's being built correctly. No vision systems, no looking over our workers' shoulder to make sure they did a fastener right. It requires a completely different rethinking. So we created the Skunk Works 2 years ago with Alan Clark, who was the chief engineer of the Model Y, Model 3, came from Tesla, left Tesla to go to Ford. And my badge doesn't work there. It's totally separate from Ford. And they've had a completely different approach. And it looks like, they're going to be successful. We're going to bet the company on them. It's a very American thing.
And as he explained, it is much like what Tesla has showed the whole industry, that you build the front and the rear and the structural battery pack separately, just as we have seen Toyota trying to copy Tesla's old production method. Ford is of course trying to do the same, and fun to hear how Jim is saying that Ford will now put the computer into the car in the beginning so it can diagnose itself. So what Tesla has been doing since the original Model S, where Tesla tests every vehicle, not just every 10,000 units, but every single vehicle is tested, but the car does it by itself. That system is actually what ended up being Tesla's full self-driving system. But now Jim is saying Ford will do that with the next generation vehicle, so in 2027. So in that regard, they will be about 15 years behind Tesla. But nice to see they are trying to do everything Tesla is doing and getting help to do that from Tesla's own engineers. So Tesla is helping the entire industry, not just by pushing them towards EVs and opening up its patent and sending manuals to how to build 48-volt architecture car and opening up its charging network. As Jim also said, Elon didn't have to do that, but he did because he's mission driven.
Well, first of all, I think we'll all be very thankful that this journey was started by his vision. And he proved that we can make electric cars profitably. That's really amazing. Aside from all the rest, he was incredibly gracious to allow Ford to join the supercharger network. And for our customers, we're number 2, as I said, 2.5 years. For our customers to have access to the Tesla supercharger networks, he didn't have to do that. But he did it because he was a mission-driven person. And so I think we'll always be grateful for that cooperation.
But Tesla is also teaching the old guys how to manufacture cars in a new way. Not directly, but by Toyota and the other guys tearing down the Model Y and learning from that, and getting Tesla's engineers over to help them learn how Tesla is doing what they're doing. And Tesla is showing that there are new ways of producing a car, so hopefully this can all help companies like Ford to survive. And Jim expects that Ford will have their new EV platform ready by 2.5 years, so probably in the beginning of 2027, and they're aiming for $30,000 and be profitable.
So when do you think we'll see what a vehicle out of there looks like, and what kind of price point are you?
2.5 years.
Okay.
And we're shooting for a $30,000 car, and to be profitable. And we think the main competitors will be the new model Tesla 2. We think Tesla will come out with an affordable vehicle, and the Chinese players from BYD and the state-owned enterprises and so that's really a challenger project in the company.
And Jim correctly acknowledged that he sees Tesla's upcoming $25,000 EV as the biggest competitor, together with the Chinese EV makers like BYD, that is making affordable EVs. And that's true, but Tesla will always have a big edge over the competition, as Tesla, the company, is set up in a completely different way than the normal OEMs, and is set up for speed in innovation. Tesla will make changes every week to their car and their production line, something the other guys are not set up to do. So in 2.5 years, when Ford's next generation car will be on the road, Tesla will have made thousands of changes to their production line and production method and their cars, and they will have raised the bar 100 times since then. So I think in 2.5 years, Ford's $30,000 vehicle will not really be in competition with Tesla's $25,000 car, as I think Tesla will probably have the Model 3 down to those prices at that time. Or at least they will have some of the new models that Tesla has been talking about that will come out between the next generation vehicle and now, so those cars will probably be around the $30,000 range. And they will come out a couple of years before Ford's $30,000 car. So I think those cars will actually be the vehicles Ford will be up against, and the $25,000 Tesla will be a whole other beast that Ford still won't be able to compete against. Maybe from the outside it will look like they can, but from the inside they will not. As Jim just admitted, the EVs they have built now are not good. Well, from a customer's view, they're just fine, but as Jim said, but we are losing $5 billion a year on selling them.
And we learned a lot. And we learned that if you just take your internal combustion engineers, supply chain, and manufacturing people, and you ask them to make an EV, it's not going to be a great EV. What I mean is the customer-facing part is great, but we lose $5 billion on our EVs.
So yes, this is not sustainable and not something we can really even call competition to Tesla. The Mark-E might look like competition to the Model Y, but when one is earning billions of dollars every year and the other one is losing $5 billion a year, it is not really competition. It is just for show. And I think Tesla's next generation $25,000 car will be just that to Ford's next generation car as well. They might look similar and the price might only be $5,000 apart, but I think Tesla will earn more money on their $25,000 car than Ford will on their $30,000 EV. But as always, Jim is giving a lot of credit to Elon Musk, both for their EV leadership but also for bringing battery refining knowledge to the US.
I give Elon a lot of credit because he's actually processing nickel and lithium in Texas right now. It's very small scale, but he's learning how to actually do it in America. He doesn't promote it, but it's a really important experiment for our country. If we get into big trade war in the Taiwan Straits, a blockade of Taiwan, whatever, and it gets really ugly, yes.
And yes, I think he's absolutely right that what Tesla is doing right now is very important for the USA as a whole, as Tesla is showing how to bring this technology to the US and be less dependent on China. A place I don't agree with Jim is that Tesla will not go into the commercial segment. Well, robotaxis might change everything, of course, but if we set the robotaxis aside for now, Elon has said they will have one vehicle in every category. They have just come out with their Cybertruck that will be the best working pickup truck on the planet. Everyone just don't get it yet because they are so distracted by the way it looks, but that will eventually go away when people learn just how good this vehicle is. But Tesla will, no doubt in my mind, make a van as well. But Jim says Tesla will not do that. But I think they will. So I think they will be competitors on more fronts than Jim is expecting, but we will see how all of this goes. But very cool to hear Jim talk about EVs in an open and honest way. And he seems to know what needs to be done. But to execute on that is of course a very different thing. So let's see if Ford can get out of the hole they're in right now, where they're losing billions of dollars on their EVs while the world is transitioning to EVs. And we will see their profitable ICE business and hybrid business going down. And the Chinese and Tesla is making it even more difficult than it ever was for Tesla, as they did not have this kind of competition back in the days as the legacy automakers are facing now. So I still think it's very much up for debate if the legacy automakers will survive this shift. But I think Ford is one of the OEMs that is in the best position to do so. And thank you for watching. And until next time, take care out there and be nice.